Well, folks, here we again for the weekly forecast. Of course, the big news during this last 7 days was the freezing temperatures that invaded the state during this past weekend. Honestly, did not believe that we would see the temperatures as cold as what happened. It is what it is. We do have a fairly extensive report, at least in terms of the temperatures for stations that we were able to get data on. That does appear at cropwatch.unl.edu. And you can link on that to see where the low temperatures bottom out at individual sites that we're reporting. Secondarily, we did not receive much in the way of significant moisture this week. Most of the activity occurred with the frontal boundary patch that started to invade the state over this last 24-hour period and started to generate some scattered and isolated thunderstorm activity in the northern part of the state, and that's expected to move completely through the state as we progress through today. So let's take a look at the upper air models for today and what we might expect during this next week. And the first thing I'll draw your attention to is we have another trough that's trying to bring some polar air over to the Great Lakes region. That has been what was responsible for dragging a cold front through our region. Now that is expected to clear the state as we regress to this morning, and therefore we would expect most of the thunderstorm activity that still resides across the state to dissipate. There is an outside possibility that we'll see some reformation of that thunderstorm activity during the afternoon, but it'll probably be confined more to east central and southeast Nebraska. The remainder of the state will be dry. Now as we go into tomorrow, we will see that a piece of energy coming off a cutoff upper level low will be starting to translate its way into the central basin, Great Basin region, and eventually it's going to make its way out into the central plains. So we are going to see nice ridging building up behind this exiting trough, so a little bit cooler conditions for Sunday than compared to today. And then we will start to see the possibility of some isolated thunderstorm activity developing in the extreme western high plains region as we get into tomorrow night. By Monday, we'll start to see this system coming into the western South Dakota, so there is expectation that we will generate some late afternoon thunderstorm activity scattered in nature across the panhandle, and some of that will begin to shift eastward as we get through the overnight hours. And by Tuesday, this system is now making its way into the central Dakotas, and so this looks to be an opportunity for thunderstorm activity to develop across a broad portion of the state of Nebraska. Although it's not going to be significant, there will be enough to cause a little bit of wetness issues across portions of the state. Best likelihood for significant moisture is probably going to be across the western half of the state. Now on Wednesday, this system starts to dissipate, but it will bring the chance for isolated thunderstorm activity to eastern Nebraska. And as we get into Thursday, we start to see a rather significant trough building in the western United States. That's going to start to pump up the warmer area into our region and bring us fairly nice conditions. And that should hold through Friday before the system starts to make its way into our region. And this looks like it could develop some fairly significant moisture with it. We'll wait to see whether or not this verifies as we do next week's forecast. So as we look at the temperature forecast for this week, fairly seasonal temperatures, slightly above normal across the east, probably running 2 to 5 degrees above normal. In the west, we're going to run about 5 to 7 degrees above normal. Temperatures going from the low to mid 70s during the weekend, possibly moving up into the upper 70s across eastern Nebraska as we get late into next week. And for temperatures across the western part of the state, we'll be looking primarily at the low to mid 80s, with possibility as we get toward the end of next week to approach the 90-degree mark. Now as we look at the 8 to 14-day forecast, we are looking for the above normal temperatures to continue, but remember our highs at this time of the year are generally in the lower 70s. And in terms of precipitation, most of the major precipitation stays to our north. Now as we look at the forecast for the month of October, we do see a tongue of cooler air being depicted by CPC coming up into the central Rocky Mountain Basin, some of that touching into southwestern Nebraska, above normal to our east and to our west. In terms of precipitation, 2 slugs of precipitation, the southwest and the northern plains. This will be associated with the northern jet. This is our subtropical plume that we've been dealing with these recent hurricanes. And in terms of our fall forecast, October through December, above normal temperatures to our north, below normal to our south. In terms of precipitation, we start to see the impacts of El Nino coming into the forecast.